The Kelty external frame backpack is one of the most influential pieces of outdoor equipment ever made. It introduced the aluminum frame, the padded hip belt, the padded shoulder strap, the zippered pocket, the nylon pack body, and the clevis pin attachment system. Every single one of those features was a first for civilian backpacking. By the 1960s, Kelty was the dominant pack brand in the United States. If you went backpacking anywhere in America between 1960 and 1985, you either carried a Kelty or something directly copied from one. Dick Kelty never patented any of it. When his wife Nena begged him to file for a patent in 1952, he said, "Man has been carrying stuff on his back forever. A backpack is nothing new." This is the full story of Kelty, from a machinist in a Glendale garage bending aircraft aluminum by hand in 1952, to the pack that opened the American wilderness to an entire generation, to the first hip belt ever put on a civilian backpack, to the Sierra Nevada thru hikers and Antarctic expeditions and American Everest and K2 climbers who carried a Kelty when they needed to trust their gear absolutely, and the chain of 4 corporate owners that moved the name from a garage in Southern California to a holding company in Colorado, while the man who built it died quietly at home in Glendale in January 2004, largely forgotten by the industry he had invented. Asher Dick Kelty was born in Duluth, Minnesota on September 13, 1919. He grew up in the upper Midwest, in the Lake Country of Minnesota, and came of age in the Depression years when the outdoor life was not a hobby, but simply what people did when they lived near water and forest and didn't have money for anything more elaborate. He made his first backpack at the age of 14, a rudimentary canvas and wood construction he built to carry blankets and food on overnight hikes with his father in the mountains of California. The pack was heavy. The straps cut into his shoulders. He noted both facts and filed them away. When the United States entered World War II, Dick Kelty went to work in Southern California for the aerospace manufacturers who were building the aircraft the military needed. He worked at Lockheed and Northrop, 2 of the companies at the center of the massive industrial complex that had transformed the Los Angeles basin into the manufacturing engine of the American war effort. He was a machinist, skilled with metal, trained by the wartime industry in the properties of aircraft-grade aluminum, a material lightweight enough to fly, strong enough to withstand the stresses of flight, and precise enough to be shaped to tolerances that canvas and wood could never approach. Those years at Lockheed and Northrop were not simply a job. They were an education in how engineered structures work under stress, how load paths through a frame determine what breaks and what holds, how material selection determines the difference between a structure that weighs too much and one that weighs exactly enough, how the relationship between stiffness and flexibility determines whether something functions or fails. Dick Kelty spent 6 years learning these principles in the most demanding manufacturing environment in the world. He would apply all of them a few years later to a problem in a Glendale garage. When the war ended, Kelty stayed in Southern California. He settled in Glendale, a quiet city in the San Gabriel Valley northeast of Los Angeles, close enough to the mountains that a man who wanted to spend his weekends in the backcountry could be at a trailhead within an hour of leaving his front door. He married Nena. He worked as a carpenter, and every weekend he could manage, he and Nena drove up into the San Gabriels and the Sierra Nevada and hiked. Every trip ended the same way. His shoulders ached. His back ached. The pack he carried, an army surplus rucksack of the kind that was the only option available to civilian hikers in the late 1940s, distributed its weight entirely through the shoulder straps, hanging from the tops of his shoulders like a sandbag from a hook. The design hadn't changed in any fundamental way since the 19th century. A bag, straps, shoulders. The human body reduced to a simple vertical column, with all the load suspended from 2 points at the top. Dick Kelty was a machinist who had spent 6 years at Lockheed, learning how aircraft distributed stress across multiple structural points. He knew, with the precision of someone who had worked with engineered materials for years, that the human body was not a simple column and that the shoulder was not the strongest part of it. The hips were stronger. The skeleton from the pelvis down was built to carry load. It had been doing so since before humans stood upright. If the weight of a pack could be transferred from the shoulders to the hips, routed down through a rigid frame and out through a belt that contacted the iliac crest, the wide bony shelf at the top of the pelvis, a person could carry significantly more weight, significantly farther, with significantly less pain. He went into his garage and started bending aluminum. The first Kelty pack frames were formed from aircraft aluminum tubing. The same material he had worked with at Lockheed, now bent and welded in a Glendale garage instead of a factory floor. Kelty hand-shaped each frame to follow the contours of the human spine, curving the vertical members inward at the small of the back to keep the load close to the body's center of gravity. A pack that hangs away from the back swings as you walk, pulling you off balance. A pack that stays close to the body moves with you. Every degree of curve in the frame was a decision informed by the engineering instinct he had developed building aircraft. He attached the pack bag to the frame using clevis pins. The pack bag was sewn by Nena on her Singer sewing machine from World War II, surplus parachute fabric, olive drab nylon ripstop that had been designed to take the shock of a parachute opening at altitude. Clevis pins are small, removable stainless steel fasteners borrowed from aircraft hardware that allowed the bag to be detached from the frame in seconds and reattached with equal speed. The clevis pin system meant that when a pack bag wore out, you replaced the bag, not the frame. When a new bag design came out, you bought the new bag without discarding the frame. The frame and the bag were separate products that worked together, a modular system that in 1952 was a completely new concept in outdoor equipment. He added padded shoulder straps, backed initially with wool carpet material, the most accessible dense padding available in a Glendale garage in 1952. He added a simple waist belt, inspired by an observation one of his hiking companions had made on a Sierra trip the previous year. A man named Clay Seaman had improvised by tucking the bottom of his wooden pack frame into the back pockets of his jeans during a difficult climb, and noticed immediately that the weight shifted from his shoulders to his hips. The improvisation was crude. The principle was exactly right. Kelty formalized it into a sewn belt attached to the bottom of the frame, the first dedicated load-transferring hip belt ever put on a civilian backpack. He added zippered pockets, the first on any civilian backpack. A hold-open bar at the top of the pack bag, keeping the opening rigid so the pack could be loaded without the fabric collapsing inward. An internal partition dividing the main compartment into upper and lower sections for organization. A lash point system on the exterior of the frame for attaching sleeping bags, tent poles, and extra gear that wouldn't fit inside. In 1952, Dick Kelty sold 29 packs out of his garage for $24 each. Total gross profit for the year, $678.85. His only advertising was a small notice in the Sierra Club newsletter. It was enough. Sierra Club members were exactly the people who spent enough time in the backcountry to know immediately, on the first weekend out, that the Kelty pack performed differently from everything else they had carried. The difference was not subtle. After a day in the mountains with a Kelty pack, returning to an army surplus rucksack felt like going back to carrying firewood on your neck. Word spread through the hiking community the way it always spreads on the trail. One hiker asking another where they got that pack, weight and comfort being the only metrics that mattered to someone 20 miles from the nearest road. In 1953, Kelty received his first repeat order from a customer who had worn out his original pack bag. The clevis pin system worked exactly as designed. The man bought a new bag, kept his original frame, and was back on the trail without buying a complete new pack. In 1954, Kelty sold his first pack to a customer outside California, shipping by mail order to a hiker in Oregon who had read about the packs in a mountaineering club newsletter. In 1955, orders arrived from Washington State, from Colorado, from New England. Each new customer had heard about the pack from someone who owned one. In 1956, Dick Kelty quit his carpentry business and committed to packs full-time. He opened a small retail store and factory in a former barbershop in Glendale. The frame bending and welding happened in the back. The pack bags were sewn at workbenches that had recently held barber chairs. Nena continued to sew bags, now alongside two hired seamstresses. By 1962, The operation had outgrown the barbershop and moved to a larger building on Victory Boulevard. In 1968, manufacturing relocated again to Sun Valley, California, where it would remain for the next decade. The product line expanded slowly and carefully. Dick Kelty was not a man who rushed. The mountaineer frame with 5 cross members for heavy expedition loads, the backpacker frame with 4 cross members for weekend trips, pack bags in 3 sizes, Model A, Model B, Model C, ordered separately from the frame and attached with the clevis pin system, allowing a single frame to serve multiple configurations. Every component was designed to be replaceable, repairable, and interchangeable. A Kelty pack bought in 1958 could accept a new bag. Designed in 1965 without replacing the frame. This was not a selling point that Kelty advertised aggressively. It was simply how he thought a product should work. In 1963, a Kelty external frame pack traveled on the first all-American ascent of Mount Everest. The same expedition that had used Eureka draw-tight tents to shelter 60 climbers on the mountain also used Kelty packs to carry equipment above base camp. Jim Whittaker, the first American to stand on the Everest summit, carried a Kelty. Willie Unsolt and Tom Hornbein, who completed the first traverse of the West Ridge, one of the most technically demanding achievements in the history of mountaineering, carried Kelty frames through conditions that would destroy lesser equipment. The images traveled. Photographs from the expedition published in National Geographic and newspapers across the country, showing American climbers on the highest ground on Earth with Kelty frames on their backs. The timing of the Everest coverage could not have been better for the brand. In 1964, the Wilderness Act passed into law, formally protecting millions of acres of federal land from development and creating the National Wilderness Preservation System. The legislation was more than environmental policy. It was a cultural statement that the American backcountry was worth protecting, worth preserving, and worth going to. It created destinations, and it gave an entire generation of Americans a reason to learn how to reach them. The outdoor recreation boom that the Wilderness Act helped accelerate put millions of new hikers on trails that had previously been the domain of mountaineers and serious outdoorsmen. And those new hikers needed packs. The Kelty frame was waiting for them. By the mid-1960s, Kelty had become the defining backpack brand in the United States. The aluminum frame with its distinctive triangular logo patch, embroidered mountains and arrow the word Kelty above Glendale, California, was as recognizable on a trailhead as a Coleman lantern at a campsite. Boy Scout troops carried Kelty frames on silver moccasin hikes in the San Gabriels. Thru hikers used them on the Pacific Crest Trail. Mountaineers carried them on approaches to peaks in the Cascades and the Rockies. The pack had moved from the backcountry specialists who had been Dick Kelty's original customers to the mainstream of American outdoor recreation. The market expanded not through advertising, but through the oldest mechanism in outdoor retail. The borrowed pack, the trail conversation, the friend who showed up at the trailhead with something you had never seen before and immediately needed to own. Word spread in exactly the same way that Dick Kelty's original Sierra Club newsletter notice had worked, through people who had used the product in conditions where performance was all that mattered and nothing else could be faked. In 1967, a man named Nick Singe requested Kelty packs for an Antarctic expedition. He asked for red, the packs Kelty had been making in olive drab, the color of the surplus parachute fabric Nena had sewn the first bags from, had never been available in a bright color. Kelty produced red packs for the Antarctic expedition, and the red Kelty became, almost overnight, the most recognizable outdoor pack in America. The color change was small. The cultural impact was not. Red Kelty frames appeared in photographs from wilderness areas, mountain ranges, and national parks across the country through the late 1960s and 1970s. The brand was everywhere on magazine covers, in gear reviews, in the background of every serious outdoor photograph taken in America for 15 years. In 1970, Dick Kelty designed and produced the first stainless steel, quick-release waist belt buckle used on any backpack in the world. The buckle allowed the wearer to drop the hip belt instantly in an emergency, a critical safety feature for climbers and and river crossers who might need to shed the pack rapidly. Before the Kelty quick-release buckle, hip belts were tied or buckled with conventional hardware that required two hands and several seconds to release. After it, the standard was a single-handed snap. The buckle design was widely copied within 2 years of its introduction. Kelty did not patent it. In 1972, Dick and Nena Kelty sold the company to CML Incorporated, a Boston-based leisure products company that also owned Carroll Reed ski shops and Boston Whaler motorboats. Dick was 52 years old. He had spent 20 years building Kelty from a garage operation selling 29 packs a year into the largest backpack brand in the United States. He stayed on as chairman through CML's ownership, providing continuity while the company expanded beyond backpacks into clothing and sleeping bags. Kelty was one piece of a diversified leisure portfolio, still the best pack in the market, but no longer a family operation guided by the instincts and convictions of the man who had invented it. Under CML, the first completely new pack designs since the early 1950s arrived: the Tioga and the Serac, both featuring a fully padded one-piece waist belt, waterproof fabric, and a new camlock buckle system. The Serac added a dedicated sleeping bag compartment at the base of the pack, separating sleeping gear from the main body. In 1973, Kelty packs were carried on the American ascent of K2, the second highest and technically most demanding peak on Earth, a mountain that had killed more climbers proportionally than any other 8,000-meter peak. The brand's association with serious American mountaineering remained unbroken. In 1974, Kelty introduced its first internal frame packs. The Tour Pack, designed by John Robinson, is considered by some historians of outdoor gear to be the first commercial internal frame backpack ever produced. The internal frame concept, flexible aluminum or fiberglass, stays built into the pack body itself rather than a rigid external structure, would eventually replace the external frame as the dominant technology in serious backpacking. The internal frame moved with the body differently, allowing a more natural gait on steep or technical terrain and sitting lower on the back for better balance. Kelty had arrived at the technology first in 1974. It would not matter commercially, because the internal frame revolution that eventually displaced the external frame in the mainstream market took another 15 years to arrive in full force. By then, the company had passed through 2 more ownership changes. In 1979, CML sold Kelty to American Recreation Products, Incorporated, a Boulder, Colorado company that also held the Sierra Designs brand. American Recreation Products oversaw a period of significant product expansion through the 1980s and into the 1990s. Women's specific packs arrived in 1987, one of the first dedicated women's pack lines in the industry, built on the recognition that the ergonomic geometry of the female torso required a different frame configuration than the male-centered designs that had defined the market since Dick Kelty's original Glendale frames. The hip belt sat lower. The shoulder straps were narrower and angled differently. The torso length was shorter. These were not cosmetic changes. They reflected the same engineering logic that had guided Dick Kelty in his garage, that the pack should fit the body carrying it, not the other way around. Tent lines through the late 1980s and 1990s expanded the Kelty brand from pure backpacking into the broader camping market. The Windfoil, the Nautilus, the Jetstream, each one tested in field conditions before it entered the catalog. Each one built to the performance standards the brand had established over 40 years of pack manufacturing. The sleeping bag line followed. Kelty's transition from a specialty backpack brand to a full outdoor equipment company was complete by the mid-1990s. American Recreation Products was eventually acquired by Excel Outdoors, a Colorado-based outdoor holding company. Under Excel, Kelty became one of a portfolio of outdoor brands, alongside Sierra Designs and others, positioned at the accessible end of the market, offering reliable gear at price points that entry-level and intermediate hikers could afford. The brand's focus shifted from the expedition-grade performance that had defined it in the 1960s and 1970s to a broader catalog designed for the family camping market and the weekend hiker as much as the serious backcountry traveler. It was a rational business decision for the market Excel was selling into. It was also a long way from the Glendale garage. Dick Kelty continued to live in Glendale, California, in the same city where he had bent the first aluminum frame by hand in his garage. He continued to hike when he could, into his 70s, in the same San Gabriel Mountains where the pack had first been tested. He watched the industry he had built become an industry almost unrecognizable from the one he had started. A billion-dollar global market for outdoor equipment in which his innovations were so thoroughly incorporated into every product that they had become invisible, like a vocabulary word so common nobody remembers it being learned. On January 12, 2004, Dick Kelty died at home in Glendale at the age of 84. There was no industry tribute, no press release from the outdoor brands that had built their products on his designs. Today, Kelty is owned by Excel Outdoors, headquartered in Broomfield, Colorado. The brand produces tents, sleeping bags, and backpacks at accessible price points sold through REI, Eastern Mountain Sports, and major online retailers. The external frame pack, the product that defined the company for its first 3 decades and that Dick Kelty had welded by hand in a Glendale garage, is still in the catalog. A handful of models, still functional, now a niche product in a market dominated by the internal frame packs that Kelty's own company had helped invent. Vintage Kelty external frames from the 1960s and 1970s, the D4, the A4, the original Mountaineer, are traded on collector forums and outdoor gear marketplaces at prices significantly above what they originally cost. A man who bought a Kelty D4 in 1971 contacted the company in 2012 to ask about a failing seam. He expected to pay for the repair. 3 weeks later, his 41-year-old pack came back from Kelty, repaired at no charge, covered under warranty. The pack Dick Kelty designed in a Glendale garage with aircraft aluminum and surplus parachute fabric for $24 is still working. The man who built it asked for nothing in return. No patent, no royalty, no acknowledgement from the industry that replicated every feature he invented and never credited him for any of them. He just wanted to carry more weight more comfortably into the mountains, which in the end is all any of it was ever for.